There are countries that are difficult to conquer because they are enormous. Others are protected by mountains. Some are surrounded by the sea, and some possess armies powerful enough to make invasion almost unthinkable. But the United States presents a different kind of challenge. Its greatest defense is not one single fortress. It is the combination of geography, distance, resources, and time. The United States sits at the center of North America. To the east lies the Atlantic Ocean. To the west, the Pacific. To the north is Canada, and to the south is Mexico. These borders have played an important role in American security. Canada and the United States share one of the longest borders in the world. Mexico lies to the south. Neither has traditionally represented the kind of great power military threat that has defined European history. Instead, America's most serious military rivals have historically been separated from the mainland by enormous oceans. And that geographical reality has shaped the country's history. An army approaching from Europe must cross the Atlantic. An army approaching from Asia must cross the Pacific. And once it reaches the American coast, the real challenge has only begun. Because the United States is not a narrow country. It is a continental-scale battlefield. The distance between the Atlantic and Pacific coasts stretches for thousands of kilometers. Between them are enormous plains, dense forests, major rivers, mountain ranges, deserts, and some of the largest cities on Earth. An invading force cannot simply capture one port, march inland, and assume that the rest of the country will collapse. America has something that military planners call strategic depth. A country with strategic depth can lose territory and still continue fighting. The front line can move, the government can reorganize, military forces can retreat and regroup. Factories can continue producing, and the war can continue far beyond the territory initially captured. This creates an immediate problem for any potential invader. Capturing a coastal region would not mean controlling the continent. Capturing a major city would not mean controlling the country. And defeating one American military formation would not eliminate the ability of the United States to continue the war. The geography itself creates layers. In the east, the Appalachian Mountains rise across the interior. Farther west, the Rocky Mountains form another enormous barrier. Between these regions lie vast plains and river systems. The Mississippi River and its tributaries create one of the largest interconnected waterways in the world. And beyond the Rockies, the landscape changes again. Deserts, plateaus, mountain valleys, and finally, the Pacific coast. An invading force would therefore face a country that constantly changes around it. A coastal army would have to adapt to the interior. A force moving through the plains would eventually face mountains. And a military advancing through one region could find itself thousands of kilometers from another. This matters because armies depend on movement. Vehicles need roads. Supplies need transportation. Reinforcements need reliable routes. And every part of a modern military must remain connected. The United States already possesses the infrastructure required to move across its own territory. An invader would have to secure that infrastructure while fighting. That difference could become decisive. The same geography that makes America difficult to invade also gives the defender enormous room to maneuver. And then there is the ocean. The Atlantic and Pacific are not simply barriers. They are also strategic shields. They separate the American mainland from most potential military rivals. For centuries, this allowed the United States to develop without facing the constant invasions that shaped European history. Wars could be fought far away. Armies could clash on distant continents. But the American homeland remained separated from those conflicts by enormous distances. That distance became one of the country's greatest strategic advantages. Yet geography alone is not enough. Because America is not simply a country protected by two oceans. It is a country with an entire continent behind those oceans. And that continent would become one of the greatest defensive advantages in modern history. The greatest advantage of the United States may not be the difficulty of reaching it. It may be the difficulty of advancing through it. Imagine an army somehow establishing a foothold on the American mainland. The first problem would be movement. A modern military depends on a constant flow of supplies, fuel, food, ammunition, medical equipment, spare parts, and reinforcements. All of these must move from the rear toward the front. But the further an army advances, the longer that logistical chain becomes. This is where America's size becomes a military problem for the invader. A force arriving on the Atlantic coast would face the Appalachian Mountains. A force moving across the Central Plains would eventually approach the Rocky Mountains, and beyond them, the western landscape would present another series of obstacles. The country is not one continuous battlefield. It is a collection of different environments. Each requires different methods of movement, and every change in terrain creates new logistical demands. A road may be essential, a bridge may become strategically critical, a railway may determine whether supplies can reach an advancing army. And whenever movement becomes concentrated, those routes become vulnerable. This is one of the fundamental problems of continental warfare. An army may possess enormous firepower, but firepower is useless if the ammunition cannot reach the front. A tank is powerful, but it cannot fight without fuel. A soldier is effective, but an army cannot operate indefinitely without food and medical support. This means that military strength is always connected to logistics, and logistics are always connected to geography. The United States possesses an enormous advantage in this regard. Its roads, railways, highways, airports, ports, and waterways already connect the country. The defender would know these systems. The invader would have to capture them. That creates a fundamental asymmetry. An American force could use the infrastructure of its own country. An occupying army would have to secure it. Every captured transportation hub would create another responsibility. Every major road would need protection. Every bridge could become strategically important, and every supply route would have to remain open. This is where distance becomes a weapon. Distance creates time. Time creates logistical pressure, and logistical pressure creates vulnerability. An invading force might begin with overwhelming strength, but as it moves deeper into the continent, that strength becomes more expensive to maintain. The army becomes more dependent on its supply network. The supply network becomes longer, and the longer it becomes, the more difficult it is to protect. The geography of the United States also creates another advantage: strategic depth. If an enemy captures one region, the country still has others. If a city falls, another city can become the center of government. If one industrial area is damaged, production can continue elsewhere. This does not mean the United States could simply ignore an invasion, far from it. But it means that a military defeat in one location would not necessarily become a national defeat. The country has room to absorb losses, and that room matters enormously in a prolonged war. America's rivers add another layer. The Mississippi and Missouri systems connect vast areas of the interior. Historically, these waterways have supported transportation, agriculture, and economic development. In a conflict, such networks could also become strategically important. But the same rivers that help the defender can complicate an invader's advance. Crossing a major river is not a simple operation. Bridges become critical, ferries become vulnerable, and alternative routes may be hundreds of kilometers away. Then come the mountains. The Appalachians are not an impenetrable wall, neither are the Rockies. But an army does not need an obstacle to be impossible. It only needs the obstacle to slow movement. Every delay consumes fuel. Every detour stretches the supply network. Every difficult crossing requires additional planning, and every additional day gives the defender more time to reorganize. This is the real strength of America's geography. It does not necessarily stop an invading army at the border. Instead, it makes every kilometer beyond the border increasingly expensive. And that brings us to an important lesson from American history. Because the United States has already experienced wars in which geography and distance played decisive roles. One of the earliest examples began with the creation of the country itself. In the 18th century, the 13 American colonies rebelled against the British Empire. Britain possessed one of the most powerful militaries in the world. Its navy was enormous, its army was experienced, and the British Empire had fought wars across the globe. Yet defeating the American rebellion proved far more difficult than expected. The problem was not simply battlefield strength, it was distance. Britain was separated from North America by the Atlantic Ocean. Every soldier sent across the ocean required transportation. Every weapon, every uniform, and every supply had to travel thousands of kilometers. The British could win battles, and they often did. They captured New York. They occupied Philadelphia. They controlled important ports. But the war continued. because the American revolutionaries did not need to defeat Britain in every battle. They needed to survive. They could retreat, reorganize, recruit new forces, and continue fighting. The enormous territory behind the major cities gave them room to do exactly that. The British could control important urban centers, while large areas remained outside their effective authority. And the further British forces moved away from their bases, the more difficult the war became. Eventually, the conflict expanded beyond North America. France entered the war against Britain. Spain also became involved. The Atlantic became a major theater of conflict, and Britain was forced to divide its attention across a much larger struggle. The American Revolution demonstrated an important principle. Military superiority does not automatically translate into political control. The British could win battles, but they could not easily transform those victories into permanent control of the colonies. That lesson would appear again decades later. In 1812, the United States found itself at war with Britain once more. British forces invaded American territory. Washington, D.C. was captured. Government buildings were burned. American cities were attacked. Once again, the United States suffered serious military setbacks, but permanent occupation remained extremely difficult. Britain could strike the American coast. It could capture important cities, but maintaining a massive occupation across the continent was another matter entirely. The geography remained, the distances remained, and the logistical problems remained. Over the following decades, the United States expanded across North America. Its territory grew, its population increased, and its transportation networks expanded. But there was one war that demonstrated something even more interesting: the American Civil War. Unlike the Revolutionary War or the War of 1812, this was not a foreign invasion. It was a war fought largely within the United States itself. And yet, the conflict revealed just how difficult it was to control such a vast country. The Union and Confederacy fought across enormous distances. Armies had to move thousands of kilometers. Railways became strategically vital. Rivers became military highways. Bridges and transportation hubs became critical targets. The Mississippi River became one of the most important objectives of the war. The conflict demonstrated that even a country fighting itself could struggle to coordinate military operations across such enormous territory. The geography did not prevent war. It made the war longer, more complicated, and more expensive. That is an important distinction. The United States had become a country whose geography made military operations possible, but difficult to coordinate on a continental scale. By the 20th century, this geographic advantage was combined with something even more powerful: industrial capacity. And when global war arrived, America's geography would protect something that could change the balance of power around the world: its ability to produce. The geography of the United States creates a powerful shield. But geography alone does not explain America's modern strength. Behind that shield lies an enormous economic system: agriculture, energy, industry, technology, and human resources. The United States possesses some of the world's most productive agricultural regions. The Great Plains can produce enormous quantities of grain. The Midwest became one of the world's great agricultural and industrial centers. The Mississippi River system connects vast areas of the interior. And beneath the ground, the country possesses major reserves of coal, oil, natural gas, and other resources. This matters because modern warfare depends on production. An army needs weapons. Weapons require factories. Factories require energy. Energy requires infrastructure. And infrastructure requires resources. A country capable of producing its own military supplies has a major advantage in a long conflict. The United States demonstrated this dramatically during the Second World War. American factories produced aircraft, tanks, ships, trucks, weapons, and enormous quantities of ammunition. The country became known as the arsenal of democracy. Its industrial capacity helped supply not only its own military, but also its allies. This created an extraordinary strategic situation. America's enemies had to fight the war, but America's industrial heartland remained largely protected. Factories could continue operating, agriculture could continue producing food, and resources could continue moving through the country. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans protected the homeland, while the continental interior provided the resources required to sustain the war. This combination was incredibly powerful. The United States was not simply difficult to invade, it was difficult to economically strangle. The country possessed multiple ports, multiple industrial centers, multiple agricultural regions, and multiple transportation networks. If one route was disrupted, another could potentially be used. If one factory was destroyed, production could continue elsewhere. If one city was damaged, the country would still possess enormous capacity beyond it. This is strategic redundancy, and redundancy is one of the most powerful defenses a country can have. The scale of the United States also makes its economy unusually resilient. The country contains enormous energy resources. Its agricultural system can support a massive population. Its transportation infrastructure connects distant regions, and its industrial base can adapt to changing demands. During wartime, this means that military power can be continuously replenished. An aircraft can be replaced, a tank can be rebuilt, a ship can be produced, ammunition can be manufactured, the war machine can continue. And that is an enormous advantage in a long conflict. Because an invader would face a completely different situation. It would be fighting far from its own industrial base. Its supply lines would stretch across oceans, its transportation network would be vulnerable, and every military loss would have to be replaced from outside the continent. The United States, meanwhile, could produce much of what it needed within its own territory. This does not make America invincible, but it changes the balance of a prolonged conflict. The longer the war continues, the more important production becomes. And the longer an invader remains, the more difficult it becomes to maintain the force required to continue fighting. This is why the United States became a global superpower. Its geography protected its resources. Its resources supported its industry. Its industry supported its military, and its military could project power across the world. But there is one problem that no amount of industry can solve: occupation. Winning a war is one thing, governing a country is another, and the United States would present an extraordinary challenge to anyone attempting to do both. Imagine that an invading army somehow defeats the first American defenses. Imagine that it captures a major city. Imagine that it occupies government buildings. Would that mean the United States had been conquered? Not necessarily, because military occupation is fundamentally different from military victory. An army can defeat another army, but controlling a population is much harder. The United States is a large and highly developed society. Its population is spread across major cities, suburbs, small towns, and rural communities. An occupying force would therefore face an enormous political challenge. It would not simply have to defeat soldiers, it would have to establish authority over millions of people, and that authority would have to survive. This is where communication becomes important. Modern societies are connected by enormous information networks: news, telecommunications, the internet, transportation, and social organizations. Information can move rapidly across enormous distances. An occupying power could control a city, but controlling the flow of information across an entire continent would be another challenge. The same geography that creates strategic depth also creates space for political resistance. An occupier might control Washington while opposition continued elsewhere. It might control New York while other regions remained outside its authority. It might secure major highways while local networks continued operating beyond them. And because the country is so large, the number of places that would require attention would be enormous. This is where occupation becomes expensive. Every city needs security. Every major road needs protection. Every transportation hub requires monitoring. Every military base must be defended. And every region outside direct control creates uncertainty. The occupying force would therefore have to divide its attention. The more territory it controls, the more soldiers it needs, the more supplies it requires. And the larger the occupation becomes, the more complicated it becomes to maintain. This is different from the problem we discussed in Chapter 2. There, the issue was the physical movement of an invading army. Here, the issue is political control. An army may solve the first problem and still fail at the second. The United States also has a long history of political organization at the local level. State governments, local governments, communities, civil institutions, and independent organizations. A foreign power attempting to impose control would therefore face more than one central government. It would face an enormous network of institutions spread across the country. This does not mean that every institution would automatically resist, but it does mean that controlling the country would require much more than capturing a single capital. The American Civil War demonstrated something similar from another direction. The country could fight itself for years because its political and economic systems were distributed across enormous territory. That same scale would make foreign occupation extremely complicated. And then there is time. An invader wants victory. An occupier needs stability. Those are completely different objectives. A military campaign can last months. An occupation may last years or decades. The longer it continues, the more resources it consumes. The more soldiers must be rotated. The more infrastructure must be protected. And the more difficult it becomes to maintain political legitimacy. This is where history repeatedly gives us the same lesson. A capital can fall. A government can collapse. An army can be defeated. But if the population continues to resist political control, the war may not truly be over. This is why America would be so difficult to occupy. Not because every citizen would necessarily become a fighter, not because every region would automatically rebel, but because the sheer scale of the country creates an enormous number of political, economic, and logistical problems for any foreign power attempting to rule it. An occupier would need to control the cities, the roads, the ports, the communications networks, the economy, and the institutions. It would need to do this across a country stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific, and it would have to do it for years. That is an extraordinary burden, and it brings us to the final question. If America is so difficult to reach, so difficult to move through, so difficult to supply, and so difficult to occupy, what does that tell us about the meaning of conquest itself? The United States is not impossible to invade. No country is. History has already shown that even powerful nations can suffer military defeat. But the real question is not whether an enemy could win a battle. It is whether an enemy could turn that victory into permanent control. And that is where America becomes different. Throughout this series, we have seen countries protected by very different forces. Russia showed us the power of distance. Indonesia showed us how fragmentation can divide an invading force. Afghanistan showed us how mountains and endurance can wear down military superiority. Norway showed us how sea, terrain, and climate can create layers of difficulty. Ethiopia showed us the power of political identity and a people's determination to remain independent. And now, America brings many of these ideas together. Its oceans create distance. Its continent creates strategic depth. Its mountains complicate movement. Its rivers shape transportation. Its resources sustain production, its industry can replace losses, and its enormous population creates a society that would be extraordinarily difficult to control from the outside. None of these advantages alone makes America unconquerable. Together, they create something much more powerful, a country where the problems of invasion do not end after the first victory. They multiply. The attacker must solve one problem, then another appears. It must overcome geography, then logistics. It must overcome logistics, then political control. And even if it succeeds, it must maintain that control for years. That is the real meaning of strategic depth. The defender does not need to win everything immediately. It needs the ability to continue, to reorganize, to replace losses, and to survive long enough for the invader's advantages to begin disappearing. This is the same principle we have seen throughout the series, but every country expresses it differently. Russia turns distance into time. Indonesia turns geography into fragmentation. Afghanistan turns mountains into endurance. Norway turns its landscape into logistical complexity. Ethiopia turns national identity into resistance. America turns scale itself into a defense. A country does not have to be impossible to enter. It only has to be difficult to control. And the United States would present that challenge on an extraordinary scale. An enemy could potentially capture a city, but America is more than its cities. It could occupy a port, but America is more than its coastlines. It could defeat an army, but America possesses more than one army. It could disrupt one industrial region, but the country has many others. And this is perhaps the most important lesson. The strength of a country is not always measured by the number of soldiers standing at its borders. Sometimes it is measured by what remains after the first defeat. Can the country continue? Can it replace what was lost? Can it move its resources? Can its institutions survive? Can its people maintain their political identity? And can the invader keep control long enough to prevent all of this from happening? In America's case, the answers would create enormous challenges. The oceans would slow the invasion. The continent would stretch the supply lines. The infrastructure would become a burden to secure. The industrial system would continue producing, and the population would remain spread across an enormous territory. The invader would not be fighting one battlefield. It would be fighting an entire system. And that is why the question of conquering America is so different from the question of defeating America. Defeat can happen on a battlefield. Conquest requires something much greater. It requires control, and control requires time, resources, legitimacy, and endurance. That is where history becomes important. The British captured American cities during the Revolutionary War. They still failed to end the rebellion. British forces captured Washington during the War of 1812. They still did not conquer the country. The American Civil War demonstrated that even the United States itself could struggle to control its own enormous territory during a prolonged conflict. And the Second World War demonstrated the extraordinary power of the country's protected industrial base. Together, these experiences reveal something remarkable. America's greatest defense has never been a single wall. It is the distance between the oceans, the depth of the continent, the scale of the economy, the strength of the infrastructure, and the time required to overcome all of it. So, could a modern army invade the United States? Perhaps. Could it capture a major city? History tells us that even the strongest defenses can sometimes fail. But could it conquer the entire country? Could it maintain control across thousands of kilometers? Could it secure every major city, every highway, every river, every industrial center, every remote region? And could it maintain that system for years? That is a very different question. Because entering America would be one challenge. Defeating its military would be another. But permanently controlling the country would be something else entirely. Perhaps that is why the United States is best understood not as an impossible country to invade, but as one of the most difficult countries in the world to permanently conquer. Not because it has the strongest wall, but because it has no single wall. Its defense is everywhere. In the oceans, in the mountains, in the rivers, in the distance, in the resources, in the industry, and in the sheer scale of the country itself. And with that, our journey through the world's most difficult countries to conquer comes to an end. From Russia to Indonesia, from Afghanistan to Norway, from Ethiopia to the United States. We have seen that geography can shape the fate of armies, but we have also seen something deeper. A country's greatest defense is not always its mountains, it is not always its oceans, and it is not always its military. Sometimes, it is the combination of land, distance, time, resources, and the determination of the people who live there. This series may be ending, but the journey is not. Because there are still countless places where geography has shaped history, where nature has influenced the rise and fall of empires, and where the land itself has changed the course of human history. Soon, new series are coming to Mythic Wildlife. New countries, new stories, new landscapes, and new journeys into the places where geography, nature, and history collide. So stay with us, because this may be the end of why countries are difficult to conquer, but it is only the beginning of what comes next. I'm Ask Studio. Thank you for joining me on this journey with Mythic Wildlife. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, sometimes the greatest defense of a country is not the army waiting at its borders. It is the land, the distance, the sea, the mountains, the resources, the people, and everything an invading army must overcome before it can ever claim victory.